Welcome back to the Dadabase. Back again with Derek Wilson for part 2 of episode 1. I think this is more of like a bonus episode than it is a episode 3, but we'll see how it goes. How you feeling today, Derek?
You know, pretty good. Pretty good. I actually was looking forward to finishing off what we started, and so this is a great opportunity. It's good to see you, Matt.
Good to see you too, Derek. Last time that we had talked, after the camera shut off for us, you and I still talked for like a good hour afterwards.
It was a good talk.
And it was material that I feel like really needed an opportunity to be shared with our audience. And it's always a good time in order to sit down and talk with you anyway.
Absolutely. Thanks.
This is one of the few times that we actually get to have a serious conversation. Most of the time it's just insulting each other.
True.
So this is good.
That's true. That's how men show affection for one another. I don't know if the audience knows this at home, but abject humiliation and insults that really go to the core of a person's self-worth, that's how you show that you care about someone. Because let me tell you something, I wouldn't waste my time with an elaborate insult for someone I didn't care about. It's just, what's the point? Too much effort.
I think we've had this discussion before. That's how you offer.
Exactly. I made the joke before the camera started running. Had I had a father, maybe I wouldn't do that. Oh, I could just blame everything on that. No, terrible. I'm a terrible person.
What a great segue. Thank you, Derek, for bringing that up. So I really found some really great value in what we were talking about, and I wish that we had the time to record that at that time.
Yeah.
Going over it now, we can't do it word for word, but there were some things that you had said that really kind of stuck with me. Perfect. Thank you so much. So, first and foremost, cheers.
Cheers. Nothing wrong with that.
To dads and dads to be.
To dads and dads to be, sir.
I'm drinking a Widmer Hefeweizen. Are you doing the Long Island iced tea thing again?
Correct.
All right.
Correct. It makes for better, more engaging television folks.
A looser tongue on Derek. That's great. That's exactly what the world needs. Is
Yeah, I need
Derek with
less
less inhibitions. It's fine. It's cool. It's cool. So yeah, we were talking, like I said, you'd said some really things that were really powerful, and I think that the audience has not necessarily a right, but it's a privilege and it's an honor to have those sorts of voices being shared and those experiences that you can talk to us about. Yeah. And there were a lot of questions that I really wanted to get to that we didn't get a chance to.
Absolutely.
Where we left off was addressing different statistics that were out there. Again, those statistics were provided by fathers.com. I have not double-checked their work, so it's worth doing your own follow-ups on that in order to verify that you agree with that. Still creates some really good discussion.
And I will say that the statistics, based on my personal experiences, seem to be reasonable. Whether I can't tell you if they're accurate or not, but I can tell you that in my experience, a lot of those statistics, I mean, I had, ready experiences and memories ready to go because I've seen a lot of that. So right. I definitely don't think, even if they're not the most accurate or absolutely on target, they're pretty darn close.
There was another point that I wanted to bring up, and we had talked about this prior, but I wanted to also address the fact that I'm not looking for you to speak for all minorities. But as a minority, as a person of color who's had this experience, I'm still looking for your personal insights on that.
Of course.
I feel like this is not an issue that is just for people of color, for minorities. This is an issue across the spectrum. You can find different statistics that will say that it is a larger issue in the Black community and in the Hispanic community than it is in others. It's still a universal issue.
Absolutely. No, absolutely.
And I don't want people to think that the only reason that you're on this and that the only reason that you don't have a father is you're black or anything
absolutely.
like that.
Absolutely.
That's a bunch of horseshit.
Yeah.
The reason that I have you on is that you're a good friend and that you have experiences that I think would be really valuable for other people to hear and for other dads to hear.
Yeah.
And with that, let's get back to some of those statistics.
Absolutely. Let's talk about them. And thank you for saying that, Matt, by the way. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. So the question that we had left off and almost ran out of time on was is that children aged 10 to 17 living with two parents were significantly less likely to experience sexual assault, child maltreatment, other types of major violence, and non-victimization type of adversity, and less likely to witness violence in their families compared with peers in single-parent family and step families.
Yeah. Yeah. And, so, yeah, I grew up with only my mom. And I didn't experience a lot of that kind of physical brutality, that kind of the hostility, the aggression. But I would say this, is that I can very well imagine, while my mom adopted a lot of she found solace and peace in religion. And so that kept her calm and kept her kind of on the straight and narrow. But I grew up in an area where there were a lot of single moms. And I can very easily recognize the fact that when you are raising a child alone, whether male or female, there could be a lot of anger, potentially a lot of resentment, a lot of bitterness about the fact that you're shouldering that burden alone and that you don't have support. Also, parents have specific needs as adults. And while their children do, and again, this is from my perspective from looking at it from a child to my mom.
Yeah.
While I believe that children offer the world to their parents and there's nothing that can replicate having a child, I also would think I would be being naive to think that a child can meet all the needs of an adult. And so, not having a spouse can be doubly difficult because not only do you have no support in raising the child, but then you also don't get certain needs that you have met. So yeah, you kind of be. I have met mothers that were not nice, and I didn't understand why at the time when I was younger. Because moms are always nice, and they're the ones that bake cookies. No. Some of the mothers I met in my neighborhood were pissed off, and they felt they maybe got a raw deal. So while I can't speak necessarily to being abused like that, I can absolutely see an atmosphere where anger and hostility and resentment and bitterness can bubble up to the point where you're hitting your child. Because whether or not you love them or not, they're still representing all that you don't have and the struggle that you're going through that other people may not be going through.
Sure.
So again,
see, it's funny that you say that because you're approaching it in the opposite direction that I would think of when I'm thinking about abuse in a family where it's just a single parent, especially a single mom, where in the realm that we are talking about of a poor family who doesn't have the financial resources that a two-parent family might have.
Yeah.
Mom's late on the bills in a poorer neighborhood, hasn't graduated high school or hasn't graduated college, is trying to scrape by, and is exploring like what her other options are for potential partners and mates and those sorts of things. Sometimes the choices aren't all that great.
Yeah.
And so you get the really charming guy who's really nice
I see
for
what you're saying.
maybe 4 or 5 dates.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Or for a few months, and then it turns out that he's physically or mentally abusive.
Yeah, actually, you're right.
Those sorts of things. And I think what the statistics is talking about is, I don't pretend to know. I mean, your thought process is just as valid as mine.
Yeah.
My concern would be about bringing in that unknown quantity of that other potential person
Smart. No,
into the house.
That's a good point.
And since you said that your mom didn't necessarily date while you were being raised, her...
Well, okay, clarification. Before so at the age of 9, I was 9, she was 32, we had our religious conversion. We got baptized, and we became Pentecostal Christians. Okay? Before that, she did date.
Okay.
So I do have not the same level of experience that some people do, but I do have experience with my mom dating a little bit. And I will say that some of what you're talking about is true. No, none of my mother's boyfriends laid a hand on me, but that was because my mother, in no uncertain terms, said to these men that my first priority is my child, and if you ever touch him, I will kill you. Now, and I just want you to understand something about my mom. My mom, in a lot of ways, felt like she was doing double duty. She felt like she was having to be a mom and a dad. And in that capacity, as a protector, she did not mess around.
Right.
And my mom had a strained relationship with her mother. She had come from a situation where her father passed away not too soon before I was born. And her relationship with my grandmother was tenuous. It was stressful.
Sure.
And so I think my mom developed this sense of protecting me. Obviously, I'm her son. But there was this sense that she may not have been protected by her mother, so she wanted to right the wrongs that she saw. And so when, before I was 9 years old, when my mom did date some guys, she made it very clear what her priorities were and very clear what they could and could not do. And my mother was kind of scary insofar as she was not one to use a lot of hyperbole or exaggeration. If
Sure.
she said she was going to cut you, she will cut you. She said it very rarely, but my mom was not one to mince words.
She was intimidated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But only because she knew that she had a lot to lose if she wasn't strong.
Right.
And so you do have a good point. If I had been raised by someone other than my mom, I think about my aunts who did date and were kind of in that same situation. Who knows what my cousins went through,
Right.
So that might be, you're right. Maybe, a stepdad comes in, charming at first, but feels like, oh, well, I'm putting up with a child that's not even my own. I get special rights and dispensation. I can treat both the woman and the child any way I want. And then that's when the domestic abuse starts, because he feels entitled to be able to behave however he wants. It's entirely possible. So again, I have not experienced that personally, but I could definitely, it's very easy to see how it would happen.
Right. And if they're the predatory type, and
Correct.
instead of Derek, you're Danielle,
Oh my God, yes.
then there's all sorts of possibilities. Not that your mom would necessarily allow it, but
Of course.
that gets really dicey really fast. And so it's all that much more important for your mom or the parents in those situations to be very careful about who they date and who they introduce to their children.
I agree with that.
Not only that, but if you develop a relationship with somebody that she likes, like she brings home a guy, he's a really cool guy. He says, you know what, I'm going to take you out fishing. I'm going to take you to go to a ball game or whatever the case may be. And you develop a friendship with the person that mom's dating.
Mm-hmm.
But the relationship between your mom and that person deteriorates.
Mm-hmm.
You've developed a relationship and you lose that potentially when your mom stops dating.
That's correct.
And they're just no longer around, and you have to say, like, well, what happened to that person? Well, they're not going to come around
super
anymore.
Complicated. Super complicated.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I think as a parent, you have to be very careful about who you introduce to your children and whether you want them to continue having a relationship with that person, even if it doesn't work out.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I completely agree with you.
So,
And that does more, sometimes that can do more emotional damage than physical. I mean, maybe you start to almost see the person as a father figure, and then they're kind of pulled out of your life, and that does more emotional or psychological damage than anybody laying hands on you. I mean, again, I'm not here to say
Right.
which damage is worse, but I could see that. I could see that. Luckily, fortunately or unfortunately, I never was really in that kind of situation. But I could easily see that being an issue.
it brings up the thought that if you had, I'm using you as the example in this hypothetical situation,
Please do.
you develop a friendship with this particular person, and then they're no longer around because the relationship, for whatever reason, doesn't work between them and your mom. You are left not only abandoned by your original dad, but this next person who comes along, who you made a connection with, you're emotionally connected to, and all of a sudden they're gone. There's the possibility that you have a harder time making emotional connections to people because you don't know if they're going to be around
Yeah.
any longer.
Yeah. That's exactly. Yeah. That's again.
Maybe it's no different than the original scenario, but maybe it's better, maybe it's worse. Like you said,
Yeah.
We're not able to judge. We're not in those situations.
Yeah.
It becomes very, very complex. And I think that I just keep coming back to the same thought of, like, you've just got to be very careful about how you proceed in relationships as a single parent on a multitude of levels in order to make sure that that goes smoothly.
Well, and I could very well imagine that if your father wasn't in your life, and you get this new guy that your mom is dating, and he's around for 2, 3, 4 years, and then he goes away, that it would make you it would reinforce that whole notion of, oh, it was my fault that my father wasn't there,
Right.
And so, yeah, you have to be careful. And
the idea of losing... I'm sorry, I didn't mean...
No, please, no, absolutely.
The idea of losing... Finding out what you're missing out on and then losing that could be really crushing.
Yeah, I believe that. And unfortunately, my mom, she will tell you herself that she's married to Jesus. So this is not me slandering or saying anything bad. She just doesn't. That never came up for me specifically. Unfortunately, all I can do is project and generalize about what other people might be going through, and kind of tell you my observations in my neighborhood about the other kids who didn't have dads. But I absolutely could see that being a possibility.
Yeah.
It's a good thought experiment.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. Well, let's take a look at the next one because we've got quite a bit of talking about
absolutely.
that one. A study of 109 juvenile defenders indicated that family structure significantly predicts delinquency. Okay.
That. I said multiple times because of the facts that we've pulled so far. That one seems the most.
Not all of these we have to go into a huge discussion about.
But I would, but I would say that so there's a off the cuff. Yeah. That one statistic feels the most political.
Fuzzy.
Yeah, fuzzy, political, ambiguous, because I need to know the definition of delinquency. I need to know, if there was a control before or at, I need to have more information.
That's fair.
Does delinquency mean tardy to school, not going to school, delinquent from school? Does it mean more inclined toward criminal activity? Does it mean not helping around the house? That's really...
No, you're right. And it's not well defined here in my notes.
Yeah.
It may be more well defined on fathers.com.
Correct. Yeah.
I pulled it straight from there, so I
Yeah.
don't think there's a difference between this and that.
Yeah.
So it might be worth more of a delve into that, but for right now, let's just move on to the fun stuff. Let's talk about
the fun stuff.
sexual activity in teen pregnancy.
Oh boy!
Right?
you're saving the best for last. It's like dessert. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. A study of 1,409 rural southern adolescents, 851 girls and 558 males,
Okay.
from ages 11 to 18 years,
Okay.
investigated the correlation between father absence and self-reported sexual activity. The results revealed that adolescents in father absence homes were more likely to report being sexually active compared to those living with their fathers.
You know, I could see that. I'm not going to dive too deeply into my first.
We don't need to know about your first experience. Based off of our last conversation in our first episode, you made it very clear that Derek was a bit of a geek.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
I was. But, you know.
You found a way to make it work?
Well, just because I was a geek doesn't mean that, like, I had no access to the fairer sex, women, and the opposite sex. But what I would say is that, well, this is what I would say. I have seen my friends with fathers, and this could be me projecting, but I felt like there was a certain fear of God. Your mom, you make mistakes, you come back, you tell your mom, she forgives you, she hugs you, and I know not all mothers are like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that there are plenty of sensitive fathers that are more sensitive than the mothers. That's not, so I can't go into the gender stereotypes here, but from my perspective and from what I experienced and what I saw, if you make a mistake, like having premarital sex or something, you can kind of rely on your mom to be like, you know what, doesn't mean you did something wrong, but it doesn't mean you're a bad person. I love you for who you are. But I can see fathers being like, what the hell are you doing? You're potentially throwing your future away, because there's a sense, again, of looking long term, looking externally, looking at the potential consequences for these actions. And I don't even think the fathers are saying that anything's fundamentally wrong with their child when they get mad like that. No. They're seeing the potential of their child and seeing it potentially dashed or rendered moot because of the actions that they're doing.
Right.
And so I could easily see, without having that dad there to be like, what are you doing? And really just dress them down and just, really not get in their face bad, but really take them to task and make them accountable. I could see kids having more sexual exploits before they really understand what the consequences of that sex is. Yeah, there could be a child that comes out of that. There could be an STD that comes out of that. There could be a lot of unfortunate consequences that you're gonna have to deal with for the rest of your life. So yeah, I could see that. Again, I mean, I don't necessarily think that was the situation in my case, but my case was slightly different because I was kind of a fish out of water in my own community. I didn't quite fit in, but I can absolutely see that being the case for other people.
It's funny that we're talking about this, and just thinking back on my own awakening. My first few partners were in a father absent home.
Huh.
My first real girlfriend that I explored with, her father was completely absent from the picture. She would be able to call him, but she never had any regular visitation with him. And so that was kind of tough. And the second or third, depending upon what order we go in, her father was completely out of the picture entirely. And she did have a stepdad, but she didn't live with him. She would visit him on an occasional basis. And so that created, I think, some definite dad issues and some
I can well imagine.
reasons for exploring sex and all of that. So
I don't mean to, I'm going to say something and it's going to sound super like mansplaining, and I don't want it to sound like that. But, and maybe it's because of film and television and media and our culture, but it feels like when a little girl does not have a father figure in their lives, there's this lack of self-esteem that only comes with having a parent of the opposite sex. And maybe that also happens with a son and their mother. I don't know, but it's weird that you say that, because looking back on some of my first partners, I can see a definite thread of that too. And even if the father was there, maybe not getting a lot of attention from him. And again, not saying that I was the substitute for the father. That's not what I'm saying.
No.
And I'm not saying, oh, well, she just needed male attention. What I'm saying, though, is that there seems to be a correlation with opposite sex self-esteem. I don't know. But you know what? We're going to have to get a couple degrees in sociology and anthropology before we can start answering these questions, because I feel like there's something there, but I don't want to go down that road, and I don't want to be insulting.
That's all right. No, I think we're going the right way. I want to be very clear that I didn't take advantage of these girls.
Yes,
it was, entirely consensual and all of that.
Well, I damn well hope so.
Right.
I would not be letting you interview me if I thought anything different, sir.
So, with that said, we're going to take a short break.
Okay.
And then we'll come back and we'll discuss some of these other
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, Derek, we're back.
Hey.
Did you have a good break?
I did. It was good. It was good. I got to talk to the waitress. And, she looked me in the eye rather than looking at my body. Because, gosh, I just get used for it. I can't even get it. None of this is true, by the way. None of what I just said was true. He puts up with me. I don't know why. I mean, seriously, guys. Okay.
Getting back to our subject.
Of course.
We were talking about different statistics. It's just dropped off the box.
I know.
I was expecting. I think we intimidated her. Being raised by a single mother raises the risk of teen pregnancy. Marrying with less than a high school degree, and forming a marriage where both partners have less than a high school degree. And I think this kind of reflects what we were hinting at or kind of nudging around earlier, in that you end up having to settle for less, or in many cases you feel like you have to, because
you maybe does have less options,
right?
Or it's funny because, I mean, on the one hand, I can see that, but I can't speak to that. I feel bad, Matt, when I say this. Like, my personal experience isn't really well defined insofar as being able to speak to that statistic. Ironically, though, I can speak to the exact opposite. So I find that my friends that are more educated wait longer to have children. And me, myself, I'm 39 years old and I don't have any children. And so maybe if having more education and feeling like you have more options means that you're maybe more willing, or you feel more comfortable waiting till later in life to have children, then maybe the reciprocal, the opposite is true, where if you're, not as well educated, when you're younger, you're like, hey, I don't see anybody waiting. All my friends and my peer groups are having children. Why not me? Or I wish I could speak to that.
It's hard
dynamic.
to know. I think you've mentioned, though, that you have friends on the East Coast that have been in similar situations, though, have you not?
Well, yeah, yes, I have seen that, and I've even seen things where when I had friends that were in college with me, they come out of college and almost immediately go into a marriage situation. As a matter of fact, I had a couple of my friends who got married at my college campus, for God's sake. So there's this sense on the East Coast, at least, that you get on with your life as quickly as possible. You get married, you buy a house, you have kids, and you do, bing, bang, bang, ba, bam, ba, bam.
Right.
But there's still a sense that it's not happening by accident, and it's deliberate. And I think that statistic seems to me to be more encapsulating a situation where maybe an accident happened, where maybe there wasn't use of protection, or there wasn't like an IUD or formal birth control that was implemented. That there wasn't, let's say, a discussion about a child being born. It was just more like, hey, I love you, you love me, we're having sex, and whatever happens, happens. And I feel like perhaps, and again, I am just spitballing here, but perhaps if you have gone through the struggle and the sacrifice of being educated, effectively giving up like 4 years of your life, you want to be a good steward over that investment. And maybe you're saying, hey, there's no reason why I need to have a kid immediately. Let's wait. And I feel that more out here on the West Coast, where people are a little bit more laid back. On the East Coast, you're absolutely right. It's do it, fast. Get it done. But I think that's, again, a subcultural thing. I don't necessarily think that's because of, that they want to go that fast because they had an education. I think I find that on the whole, on average, when you're a little bit more educated, maybe you want to wait longer. So I don't know. But
the other thing that I want to bring up is that it feels a little bit like we're piling on single moms.
Yeah.
This is not any sort of like judgment towards single moms. They've got
Absolutely
enough
not.
on their shoulders.
Absolutely not.
At all. They need help.
Absolutely.
They need help, and they need dads to stick around and do their part.
That's absolutely
in order to raise this child together, children together.
Yep.
It's too much for one person, whether it's a single dad or a single mom, whomever.
That's right.
It's too much work for one person.
Yeah. And my mom was my hero. So I just want to put that out there.
Right.
My mom was my hero. And so I don't think of this, at least the motivation that I'm coming at this is I'm not trying to pile on single moms, because it's hard as hell.
Yeah.
I'm trying to analyze what the hell's going on behind the scenes, or how children are affected adversely or positively if a particular parent isn't there, and if there's a gender effect happening,
Yeah.
And so, no, absolutely not. It's very, in the media and in politics and in culture, it's very easy to pile on a single mother, because, oh, well, we know she had sex and she has this child right here. It's proof that Scarlet Letter. She's a whore. She's a slut.
Absolutely. I mean, this goes beyond the topic of fatherhood.
Of course.
But it becomes that entire slut-shaming thing that women can't enjoy sex. Mm-hmm. And that if women do, then they're cast with all of these names that you're talking about.
Exactly
all of
correct.
these slurs and so forth, and people look down on them.
Yeah.
And it just bothers me to all hell.
Absolutely.
And I feel like the world needs to evolve to a point where we recognize that women are just as much human as anybody else is.
We're all human. We're all human.
Right. So the idea that we're going to divide up health, this is getting political.
Well,
this is really getting political.
After what happened a couple days ago, I think, unfortunately, we're all kind of like, yeah.
So my point is that women should be free to enjoy all the things that come with being human that everybody else does. And they shouldn't be judged or held to a higher standard or any of those sorts of things. And it's going to sound like I'm patting myself on the back here, but I've had those difficult discussions with my daughters to say, it sounds really awkward and really weird. I want you to have a safe but fulfilling sex life. Whatever that means for you,
Oh, yeah.
just please be safe.
Yeah.
Make
Correct.
sure that you are comfortable with your partners. They are taking care of you just as much as you are taking care of them.
Yeah.
Use protection.
Mm.
Know your limitations. Go have fun.
Yeah. We're definitely going off topic a bit, but
We really
I will.
are. We really
But
are.
I will just very quickly, in a nutshell, say what my piece, and then we'll go back
Yeah.
on to our statistics here. But this is what I would say. I would like society to get to the point where we don't exalt men for having sex and then shame women for having sex.
Right.
Let's just keep it all neutral. A guy is not more masculine because he has lots of sex, but he's also not worse because he has it. And a woman is not worse because she has lots of sex, or better.
Right.
Hey, some people just like sex, and that's what they have. That's number one, I guess, my point.
Mm-hmm.
The second point I want to make is, I think when you see a single mother, instead of having that cultural imperative of, oh, that's someone who had sex and was irresponsible, it should be the exact opposite, because it took two to tango. Unless
Right.
she was artificially inseminated,
Right.
there was a dude that was in the bed with her too.
Right.
So number one, you're just seeing
You don't know
half
her
of the
story.
story. Exactly. That's number one. But number two is you're seeing the parent who stuck with the child. Where's the dad?
Right. Good point.
Why aren't we
Really
shaming
good
more of
point.
these fathers who don't seem to have any attachments or encumbrances? They are the ones that need to be taken to task. Like my father, he wasn't around, and because he wasn't around, it's like almost like, oh, well, we can just, we can pile on this, single black mom who, didn't go to college. Not acceptable. What about the dad who didn't have enough wherewithal and enough responsibility to actually be in his son's life? That's where I'm talking about. So I think we need to start flipping the script and really stop. It's very easy to shame the person that we can see did the crime. By the way, using air quotes, because that's bullshit. It's not a crime.
Well, since we're talking about flipping the
Of course,
script, I
of
can
course.
already hear the feedback that I'm getting on this commentary.
Oh boy, here we go.
But there are, on the opposite side of things, there are plenty of single dads out there.
Correct.
Where
No,
mom
that is correct.
has
That is
abandoned the
absolutely
children.
correct.
And so they deserve as many accolades
Absolutely
for
correct.
taking care of their children.
Absolutely.
Being responsible
Absolutely
for their
correct.
child.
But they don't deserve more. And I have seen
No, that's true too.
single fathers
Yep.
get heaped on with praise from single moms and single dads, like, oh, you stuck in there. You did the right thing. You didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
No.
What else am I going to do?
Exactly. You're the father. You need to do that. Now, again, not pardoning the mother from her responsibility in
Right.
that situation. All I'm saying is we give a gold star to single fathers who actually father, and then we expect single mothers just to do it because that's what they do.
Right.
And then you get no special accolades, you get no special whatever. You just do it. That's what's expected of you by society. So
Right.
that's all I'm saying. And look, here's the thing. The reason why I'm saying this from my perspective is because I had a single mom. I didn't have a single dad.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is where my experience comes from. Not a sense of favoritism one way or the other. It's just that was my reality. So, but no, this is good stuff. Hit me with something else, Matt. This is
Okay. Well, we're moving on beyond statistics.
Okay.
That was the last one that we had for that.
That was a lot.
It was. It was. There is another website out there called fatherhood.gov. It's run by the Ad Council, and the Ad Council has a lot of different ads. They'll put up billboards.
Yeah.
A good friend of mine who actually produces the song that leads into this show sent me that a picture of a billboard in Portland. And it's for fatherhood.gov. And so if you go to their website, you have an option in the bottom right-hand corner to click on a map of the United States, where it will connect you with programs based on state.
Okay.
So you've got all 50 states there, and you can click on your specific state to see what sort of programs there are out there, what sort of resources, and if there's any events going on.
I think you told me about that. Yeah.
I did.
Very cool.
It is really cool. It would be even better
I know what's coming.
if that website had something of value in a majority of those states. Now, some states are better at providing those programs, there are lots of different variables that will cause issues there.
Thank you.
So we can't go into all of those variables, but let me just talk about the states that are near and dear to our hearts.
Of course.
I live in the state of Washington, so I checked out Washington first. The one program that they have is for the Washington State Department of Corrections in Tumwater, Washington, which focuses on 5 counties in southwest Washington and families of poverty and incarceration. Now, I am not poo-pooing this program.
I know where you're going with this.
I think that's fantastic that there is a program to help incarcerated fathers get back into touch with their children and help them transition from prison out to the regular world.
Sounds like a good program to me.
That there's got to be a huge amount of pressure there. I never want to be part of that program.
Yeah. yes.
At least not as a as a member of it. Yeah, exactly. So that's the one program that are out there. The Washington resources that are listed for that state are simply federal programs for administration for children and families.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there isn't any state programs that are listed there.
Yeah,
there are no events. There isn't a barbecue cook-off. There isn't
a chili contest.
Right. There's none of that. It's just not listed.
Yeah, I can see that.
Maybe there are events and they just never make it to the page. Who knows? I don't know who's responsible for updating that. That would be really interesting to know.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Oregon. We're in the state of Oregon.
Yeah, I live in Oregon.
Right. Oregon has no programs.
Yeah, I can.
No programs at all. Nothing listed, at least. Oregon has the same resources as Washington, which is to say there is a federal program. There is no state listed program.
Yeah.
There are no events. There is no focus on fathers.
So there's no incarcerated program. Like
none of that.
Trying to get halfway
Nothing
house
listed.
kind of. Wow.
Nothing listed.
Okay.
There's nothing listed on the.
I don't think I remember that.
Fatherhood.gov. Now, Maryland,
my home state.
Maryland,
go Ravens.
Right. They have quite a few more, including some specifically for the city of Baltimore. Not just the state, but for the city of Baltimore.
Absolutely believe that.
I have no doubt that that's true. And I checked California. California has a number of different things. You might expect that with a higher population than some other states.
Yeah.
It's a big state.
Yeah.
But there isn't the same sort of giant list. It all is luck on what is listed for your state.
Yeah.
And for the ad council to be promoting fatherhood, which is entirely a great thing, there has to be something out there for you. If you're drawing me to this site, give me something. Yeah. And give me more, not instead of, but more than just here's a plan for incarcerated fathers.
Oh, absolutely. Look, Matt, here's the deal, okay? And I'm going to say a disclaimer for the audience here. I am not a men's rights advocate, okay? Right. I think men have it pretty goddamn good, okay?
Cheers to that.
Yeah, cheers to that. Ding. You know, and honestly, I'm going to say this too, and I'm sorry if it's too liberal for certain people, but it's good that in the current media that some of these Hollywood bigwigs are being taken to task for the exploitation and harassment of actresses and other people who work in the film industry. Yeah. So, you're not going to find someone who is less men's rights than me. However, I will say this. It would be insane of me as a rational man not to see that culturally speaking, by default, women are considered the providers of child. They are perceived as being the default providers of care for children. And by default, I believe our society and our culture has, because we perceive moms as being mothers of children and heads of orphanages or whatever, that the programs to help children are going to be directed toward women
Yeah.
by default. Again, not because there's some kind of crazy conspiracy, but because that has been the traditional place where our society has put women.
Right.
And so now we're seeing that fathers who are doing the right thing, who are trying to be good parents, don't have resources to even network with other fathers to get ideas on how to do shit.
Right.
You know?
You know, someone should create a web series in order to create a resource for fathers to go to.
If no one knows, this is the jerky motion I'm
Don't do
making.
that.
Oh, it's
Don't do
terrible.
that.
It's terrible.
No, I want to weigh in on what you had to say, though, about the world kind of being geared towards moms.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Well, that's a terrible statement.
Rephrase, sir. Use your words.
Right. There is a supposition that happens in some industries where the mom is automatically the caretaker.
Yeah, yeah.
And from my own personal experience, I have health coverage for all of my children. And my first wife has secondary health insurance coverage on my children. There was a specific bill that I had to take to my insurance company to say, hey, you're screwing all of this up. What the heck is going on? You're not paying what you said you were going to pay.
Yeah.
And it came back that they said, well, in these instances, when there's a split household, our policy is that the mom is automatically
Wow.
the primary
Wow.
the primary provider, and we are secondary.
Wow.
This is my insurance company.
Yeah.
And so I said, no, that's wrong. You need to fix that. And they said, well, you're going to have to provide documentation. So I had to make a copy of my parenting plan and agreement that reflected that as far as the parenting plan was concerned, I was the one responsible for providing them with health insurance.
Yeah.
So I had to take time out of my day, scan that, send it off to them, verify that they received it. And this is after like 2-3 months. Regular insurance sort of like runaround.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, no, you received this. Tell me that you got it. Tell me that you read it and that you've changed it in your system because this is how it is.
Yeah.
And your presumptions are absolute crap.
Yeah.
That you can't make that.
Yeah.
But it still exists. That company is still providing insurance to millions and millions of people, and they have their policies.
Well, and I haven't experienced this, but I've heard in custody disputes that it's almost like the mother has to be a monster before the father is like, okay, no, we're going to give custody to the father because sole custody with no parental rights for the mother. The mother has to pretty much be doing meth in the courtroom at the time in front of the judge and being like, you know, and basically banging her new boyfriend. I mean, in the courtroom. It's got to be over the top proof that the mother is doing something wrong before the father gets sole custody, when in fact, you know, there are mothers who are not doing right by their children and were never really calibrated to be mothers. See, I think that's the thing too. There's a certain amount of misogyny where you guess what? Just because a woman can have children, maybe they have no maternal instincts, and we have to allow for that right for a woman to just be able to have sex, do what she wants to do, be selfish, and do what she wants to do. And we have to, our court system should be calibrated to say, hey, there are women out there like that, and we should take that into account, not just assume, oh, because she's a woman, she's going to be maternal and nurturing and, you know, love her children. No! That's not the case. And
Not everybody's cut out for it.
not everybody is cut out for it. And we obviously will give men that scrutiny and say, oh, yeah, he was just never really supposed to be a dad. He's just not built for that. He's a boy. But when, women, it's like, no, 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 no. Unless there's something super crazy going on, they're still a mom, and they'll figure it out. They'll come around. What are you talking about? So yeah, no, dude, I hear what you're saying, and I agree. So
point being, out of all of that, there are numerous and varied resources out there for moms, and they deserve every one of them.
of course, absolutely,
But there are fewer and less well known for fathers.
correct.
There aren't a whole lot of resources to go out there. I love the idea of fatherhood.gov. I would like it to be
More robust. Yeah,
right.
I get
Give
it.
us more to work with.
Yeah,
Given the insular tendencies of men anyway, if you are able to drive them to your site, whether it's the really cool ads that they come out with that really kind of tug at your heartstrings, or whether it's a billboard or whatever it gets them to that site, they got to be able to walk away with something,
absolutely.
right? So more effort is needed to overcome that than the alternative, not less.
Yeah, agreed. More resources, not less. I'm 100% on board with that.
Cool. So we're going to take another quick break here.
Sure, absolutely.
And then we're going to get into more stuff about you specifically.
Oh, absolutely.
So we're going to really kind of crack open those ribs and get in there and get our hands dirty. It's gonna be
Gross.
It's going to be great.
Bad wording.
We'll be right back. So, welcome back, Eric.
Hey, nice. Thanks for the station break.
So, as we talked about, I want to get a little bit more into some of the personal stuff that we were talking about before.
Absolutely.
And that relates specifically to you.
Let's talk about my favorite subject, me. No, that's wow. Joking. Please.
I don't know how off the mark that is, though.
No, I do like to talk. I'll talk about anything, so we all know that that's not true.
All right. So last time that we talked, in the episode, you had talked about that you were terrified about becoming a dad.
Yeah, I did say that, didn't I?
Because of your lack of knowledge and experience.
Correct.
And
absolutely.
First and foremost, I want to say thank you, because that helped inform some questions that I had for future guests. And I was able to ask people, how did you learn how to be a dad?
Yeah.
And you would even ask me the question of what's a piece of advice that I received from my dad that I couldn't have gotten elsewhere.
Yeah.
And I can provide an answer to that, as promised.
About time.
Jeez. Right?
I also have a dad joke, by the way.
Oh, this is good. This is good.
Yeah,
that's coming.
Oh, God.
So you would ask the question of what sort of advice I had gotten. And I think it speaks to exactly what you thought of. I couldn't think of anything that my dad had expressly told me or shared with me that I couldn't have gotten from another source. I'm sure there was, but I can't think of it.
Yeah. No, that's funny.
What my dad provided me that I couldn't get anywhere else was the day-to-day example of what it meant to be a man or to be an Amundsen.
Yeah.
And
to be there.
Right.
As a dad, you know?
Right. To give me an example of what it meant to be a human being and how to take care of other people and what those interactions look like. And both good and bad. The things that I wanted to improve upon when I became a dad. So that's my answer to your question. I think it speaks to exactly what you were talking about. And we went further in that. I'm just going to repeat myself for for the presence of the audience. I think that you have great potential as a father. And I don't want you to not be a father because you're scared of it.
Yeah.
I understand where that would come from. I did a little bit of research between last show and this one.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Where you would talk about this thing, this phenomenon called Star Wars, of there being a light side and a dark
Is
side.
that a thing? Yeah.
Turns out that there's a few movies about this.
What?
And
Yeah.
in the show, in the movie, they often talk about sensing the Force in another, that they have tremendous potential to be a great Jedi.
Mhm.
And in that same vein, I feel like you have great untapped potential to be a father. Whether that happens or not is entirely up to you and whomever you are dating. Hi there.
Hey, thanks for getting me in trouble, Matt. No,
Absolutely.
just joking.
That obviously is something that you have to decide.
Yeah, yeah.
I still think, though, that my biggest concern for you as a father is something that I don't actually feel like is likely or possible, that in some way you would follow your father's example of like, this is too terrifying, this is too scary,
away.
and run away.
Yeah.
That doesn't strike me as your character or who you are as a person.
Yeah, well, and here's the deal. I actually don't think I'll ever do that. My likelihood to run away is actually, I feel like, probably 2%, 1%, 0. It's super low. My fear, I have lots of fears, but one of the fears is that I will like do the exact opposite of my father, that I'll smother my child, that I'll be there for everything. And my kid is like, oh my God, Dad, I know you love me. I love you too much, but God, just give me some breathing room. And then end up rebelling and doing something that I wouldn't do, whether it be illicit drug abuse or criminal activities or whatever, just because they just want to get away from me. That's something that's in my head. But I will say this, is that I appreciate what you're saying, Matt. I really do. And it brings to mind something that someone told me. And this, whenever I start getting, scared of being a dad because of everything I don't know, one thing does come back to my mind. And that is, I was told very specifically, you're never ready to be a parent. You can think you are. You can read all the books. You can, talk to other parents. You can talk to your own parents. You may think you're ready. You're never ready, because the reality of parenthood, the waking up at 2 a.m. because your child is colicky, the fact that they swallow something, you don't know what it is, so you call poison control, the fact that you have to go to the emergency room because they're dehydrated and they have running a fever of 102, whatever, you're just not ready for it. And because you fall in love with your child, you don't just love your child, you adore your child. You would do anything to keep them safe, and before you're a parent, I've been told you're not ready for that level of love. You don't even know what that is.
Right.
And that's the thing, is that there are some experiences in life that you're only prepared for once you're in it, because there's no pre-work or preparation that can actually get you ready. And so that fact gives me a certain amount of solace, but that fact also scares the bejesus out of me, because in every other aspect of my life, I've been able to do a kind of trial and error, or do pre-work or research or this or that, and feel prepared going into like the interview or going into volunteering. That's never going to happen with parenthood. Never. I mean, I think I can get to a point where I can calm my fears and be more, hey, let's roll with the flow. But I don't think I'll ever be like, I'm 100% prepared to be a dad, until I'm a dad.
Well, you're right. You're right. That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
that doesn't happen. The other thing I wanted to point out is that you're right. You may end up being so lovey-dovey smothering that creates its own issues.
Yeah.
That, at least in my opinion, I don't know how that plays out for you.
Yeah.
That, in my opinion, is a better representation of fatherhood than what you had.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
And I think that no matter what you do, not just you, but
Yeah.
any father, no matter what you do, you are going to make mistakes. You are going to have both positive and negative effects on your children. And that is
Yeah.
unavoidable.
Yeah.
And that is something to bear in mind as you go through that journey. There are days that I have had in dealing with my children where I broke their heart. I absolutely broke their heart. I'm like, I don't know how we're going to get to next week.
Yeah.
I have no idea how that happens.
Yeah.
And 2-3 days later, something else happens. Something that gives you just that tiny little bit of hope. You can go to bed feeling completely defeated, like I got it all wrong today, and I have no idea what happened.
Yeah.
I know that I'm at fault. I don't know what I did.
Yeah.
Or maybe I do know what I did and I don't know how to fix it. And yet, somehow, some way, the next day or the next, something happens that gives you back that little bit of hope because your children forgive you for whatever fuck up that you made
Yeah.
the day before.
And I believe it.
And so,
Because you're there, you're ever present. And that's the trick. That's what I've heard.
that is true. The key to being a dad, this is something that my dad shared with me earlier this year. Being a dad is being there whether you're needed or not. That's what
great.
being a dad is.
See, only a dad would say that. That's awesome.
Right.
That's really awesome.
And it was in the context of, we've got these ballets to go to, we've got these swimming contests to go to, and all of those sorts of things. And you love seeing your kid participate. You love seeing them taking interest in something outside of themselves and being a part of a larger whole. That said, sometimes you find yourself gritting your way through a middle school
I can imagine.
band concert or something like that. Right?
Imagine.
Your kid's on the cymbals and you're like, yep, that's
Yep.
my kid.
Yeah.
And I'm here for an hour and a half to listen to my kid bang some cymbals together. My kid never played the cymbals, so
Yeah.
I'll just say that. But you sit through it because you want to be there. You want them to know that you're there and appreciating all of the hard work that they've done.
Absolutely.
And so sometimes you just kind of grit your teeth and you go through it. And then it gets to a point where it's like, my kid's going to districts.
Yeah.
My daughter's swimming in districts. Or my daughter is one of the leads in the Nutcracker.
Mm-hmm.
I've got another daughter who's playing softball. And their team is going to the playoffs. Whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So it's just about being present, like you were talking about. That was one of the things that I wanted to ask you is what would you do differently than your dad if you were to have a child? And part of that super extra time that everybody else missed out on was you saying being present.
Yeah. Wow. And I have a follow-up question for you eventually, but
yeah, bring it.
But I'm just going to put it out there. Please don't let me forget. I want to ask: what do you remember that you overcompensated for because you thought your father did it wrong? Because that's a fear I have, overcompensating because my dad wasn't there. But we'll get to that. Okay. So, what I would do different than my father? Obviously, I would be there. I'd be present. I would love my child, but not just say the words, because he said those words, but also show them through behavior. That being said, at a fundamental level, I want to be less selfish than my father was. And here's the deal. Even if my dad had been present, I've done some extrapolation. I've really thought about this a lot. I mean, obviously I've thought about this a lot. And had my specific father been in my life, my mom worries that it would have been bad because he would have been a bad influence, which it's true, but she's never actually talked about in what way he would be a bad influence. And when I thought about it, yes, there's his substance abuse, and yes, he's, he had an issue with, women and all this kind of stuff. But those are superficial. I think the thing I would do different than my father at a very fundamental level is I would not be selfish. Because even if my father had been in my life, I think he'd be selfish. And that would destroy a lot of the fact that he's present. Just being present, is good, but when you're so selfish that you're worried about how you look, or you getting the credit, or you being seen as the hero, or, well then, yes, you're there, and that's great, and yes, maybe you're even working and making money and providing for the needs of your child, that's great. But if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
wow, we're going
right?
deep.
Yeah, that just happened. So strap in, motherfucker, and get ready for some knowledge. But if you're looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there's a sense of, yes, there's food and water and shelter at one level. And then the next level is, maybe companionship and peer-to-peer recognition of value. And the next is, love, romantic love maybe. And I don't remember all the levels, but and I think the top is like self-actualization, where you're just so aware of yourself and who you are, and you're so in tune with the cosmos that there's almost no difference, kind of thing. I mean, just a high level of just amazingness. But a father whom meets your needs is better than a father who doesn't. So yes, my father, if he had been around and just been working and paying for my medical bills or whatever, I'd always bring up medical for some reason in these interviews. I don't know why. But if he had been, buying food, buying clothes, that kind of stuff, that's great. But I wouldn't want a father who just does that and then doesn't encourage me to be myself. Doesn't encourage me, say, son, you're going to do stuff that's not going to necessarily make me look great. But I want you to do it because it's your life. That's what I wanted. And that's what I hoped, if I'm ever a dad, I can do for my son, my daughter, whomever, my transgender child, I don't care.
Right.
Whoever I have as a child, I want them to know that I don't put my needs ahead of theirs. Even if I'm just there. And yes, being there is important, but there's that level, and then there's the level of, hey, I want to encourage you to be a person who's unique and whose identity is different than mine.
Yeah.
And I have seen some parents who live vicariously through their children, and yes, they're there, yes, they're providing all their needs, but it does such a disservice to that child, in the end, because they don't know who they are, independent of their parents. So that's a super long answer, but that's what I hope I do.
Yeah. No, I think that's fantastic. And I'm just sitting here picturing, I always pictured if you had a child, it would be a son. And now I'm picturing Derek with a daughter, and that would wreck you.
Oh, it would destroy me.
That would absolutely...
Done.
You would be the absolute puddle on the ground of just love and...
all white. I look like Santa Claus. I'd be worried all the time.
She would have you wrapped around her finger so
you know what?
easily.
So easily. I could see that. I could see that. I'm not going to lie to you.
I really like this picture.
Whatever.
It's a good mental image. All right. So, talking about your dad.
Yeah.
When we were talking previously, I'd also asked you about how much time in your entire lifetime have you shared with your dad, cognizant, like actual spent time with him in that. Do you remember what your answer was?
It was a couple days worth, maybe a week and a half or something.
You said a week and a half.
Okay. Yeah.
And so that is absolutely astounding to me. The idea that I have been on training trips for work
Yeah.
and spent more time in
Yeah.
Augusta or some other city, Ann Arbor, for my Ann Arbor friends. And I know those people have had a greater impact on my life than
My
your
father had
father
on mine. Yeah.
had in yours.
Yeah.
And I've spent more time with those people than what you have.
That's real, dude. That's
And-
some real shit right there.
Yeah. So you had also mentioned that there was an important point that I'm kind of working from is that I'm working from a place of knowing what it's like to have a father. And I know what I would be missing if that was gone. Whereas you were working from a place of like, I've never had that. I don't know any different.
Correct.
And so you have an idea of, you don't have an idea of what necessarily that you were missing. It's just really hard for me to process.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he still had an impact in his absence. I won't deny that.
Yeah, of course.
We've talked about that.
We talked about that.
But I can't conceive of a life without my dad.
Yeah, it's hard because this is one of those times, Matt, where we are just divided. I can't conceive of a life with my father.
Yeah.
The day to day. What does that look like?
So
I can project, but
you had talked about your grandfather before.
correct. Yeah.
So I want to know a little bit more about that. What father figures did you have in your life? Other than maybe, tell me about your grandfather.
Of course.
Tell me about other ones that you might have had too.
Yeah.
Who helped fill in the gap?
That's a great question. And so when I was growing up, thankfully, I did have certain men in my life, older men, who contributed to my sense of manhood. I had a next door neighbor named Charlie who helped me. I will never forget this. He helped me do a science project where we built an electromagnetic telegraph. One of those batteries and the tick, 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 tick.
Yeah.
It's really great. And he was amazing and he was helpful. He was an older gentleman who didn't have any children himself. And he just befriended the next door neighbor kind of thing in our apartment. Yeah, and he was a white guy. And
not all of us are bad.
Yeah. You're a good dude. Go white people? I don't know how that works.
It's fine. It's fine.
Okay.
Tell me more about Charlie. Don't talk about
So, yeah, wow. So there was Charlie, who's my next door neighbor. There was one of my science teachers, Mr. Brower, wonderful man. He was my physical science teacher in 9th grade at Milford Mill Academy. Well, it was Milford Mill High School back then, but it became Academy. And then he was my physics teacher at Carver Center for Arts and Technology. I changed schools, but he was at both schools, and he was a lot of the impetus for me going to a magnet school where I could focus on literary arts and try to reveal my potential.
Sure.
He was a fantastic person, and I still value him to this day. There's my grandfather, of course. My grandfather...
You didn't meet until you were 17.
Correct. And I only really knew for 5 years. I was down in Huntsville, Alabama, visiting him and my grandmother. And we were having a man-to-man talk, And I was telling him, that I was in graduate school, that I was volunteering in Big Brothers Big Sisters, that I was volunteering on my... I was on the executive board of my old high school to raise money. It was like the fundraising board or whatever. I was telling him all these things I was doing because I was proud of the activities I was doing and how I was giving back to the community. But also I wanted my grandfather to say, to be proud of the things I was doing. And because I respected my grandfather so much, not only when he said he was proud of me, it carried weight because my grandfather had accomplished things in his life. He had been a electrical engineer at NASA. He is in pictures with Mission Control where he's one of two black people, and the other black guy in the picture is a guy who is the janitor who has a broom, you know, because he's sweeping.
Right.
He had schematics to the Titan rocket project because he had worked on them. He was the real deal. He had autographed pictures of astronauts who I'd never seen before because these guys weren't as popular as John Glenn or Shepard or whatever.
Right.
And it wasn't one of those, an old gentleman just like mouthing off about what he'd accomplished. He knew all this stuff and he had this confidence. So when he said, "I respect you," oh my God, the sense of worth just was beyond measure. I couldn't even put into words. And then he said something to me. I will never forget this in my entire life. And if I can pass on wisdom to anybody who works too hard or feels like they don't deserve what they have, this is what I would say. My grandfather said, "You know, son, you've done all the heavy lifting. Now it's time to enjoy the fruits of your labor." And I had spent so many years trying to prove myself to my father in the back of my head. Like, I knew my father and I weren't going to have a relationship, but it's like I wanted to show my value, maybe just to myself. I don't know. But the sense of overachievement, the sense of doing well on tests, the sense of being a nerdy guy, all that was in service to improve my value as a person. And when my grandfather said, "You know what? You're good. Just chill out," like basically, it was the most relieving statement that any human being has ever said to me. Even more than my mother, because I love my mom, but my mom loves me because my mom loves me, you know? My grandfather didn't just love me because I was his grandson. He loved me because he saw that I was doing good things and that it was never enough in my head, and that I wasn't enjoying my accomplishments and my successes. So these are three different guys who helped me on my journey. And I wouldn't be the same person if not for those male role models and those male figures in my life.
So it sounds as though from your grandfather, you got a sense of self-worth.
Oh my God, yes.
Of self-esteem and just
renewed. Yeah.
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 Which is wonderful. What did you get from Mr. Bowers and what did you get from Charlie?
Sure. So
what of them did you take and is now part of Derek?
Sure. No, that's fair. So, you know, Mr. Charlie, again, was the guy who lived next door. And, I was in school and learning, and I was around other kids who, at that particular time, before high school, I didn't feel like necessarily being a black male meant I had to be stupid, you know?
Right.
Or I should say that that's not even accurate. What I should say is I didn't feel that I wouldn't be rewarded by hiding or concealing my intelligence at that point. Later on, I realized I should have just been like, but whatever. So Charlie helped encourage my sense of intellectual curiosity and made me feel like it wasn't a bad thing. Because that science fair project was just awesome. That was my idea. I was like, oh, telegraph machine. I don't understand. What's this? Electromagnetic. Yeah. It was amazing. And then Mr. Brower, he was an amazing man. If he had, let me tell you something. Okay, this is Mr. Brower right here. He was my physical science teacher at Milford Mill. And I wrote a poem about the sun. And I liked words. That's something that my mom put in me. I like writing. And so I said, oh, well, on a whim, it was about about the sun. And so I gave it to him thinking, hey, he might like it. He told me of this school that was an art school. And he was like, you should definitely try out. Had it not been for Mr. Brower, I wouldn't have gone to Carver. Had I not gone to Carver, I wouldn't have gone to St. Mary's, my college. Had I not gone to St. Mary's, I wouldn't have gone to the University of Baltimore and worked at an investment firm. I am positive, and I don't mean this in any, how sometimes people like to think that their life is a narrative or like a television show and they're the main character. Sometimes I think that. But this is not a... When I say that Mr. Brower was probably one of the most pivotal people in my life, I don't mean that in this kind of self-deluding, exaggerated importance thing. I can see that at the point at which he influenced me and helped me become a better man, that if that event hadn't happened, it would have skewed all these other relationships. And I can tell you, if not for Mr. Brower, which is crazy, I would not be here on this YouTube series talking to you and interviewed, because I wouldn't have come to Oregon.
Right.
Because I know for a fact, had I not met him, I would have gone to a special arts school. That allowed me the confidence and the education level and quality of education to go to a college and feel prepared. That college experience allowed me to get that job at the investment firm and then be doing the grad school on the side. And that, because my career was so solid and because I had certain credentials, I felt comfortable coming to Oregon, leaving everybody I knew, all my friends, all my family, and still feel like I could succeed. If I had, less credentials or less of a resume, I would have never left Maryland, because I would have been like, why am I special? Like, why am I going to stand out in a competitive crowd with job competitors, with people who know everyone? So, yeah, I know that's a super long answer, but Mr. Brower really allowed me to have, he gave me the foot in the door for the rest of the world. Like, my horizons were vastly expanded, and I didn't limit myself just to say that I was going to live in one city for the rest of my life. So
that's great.
Yeah,
that's wonderful. So I'm going to take one last break.
Of course, absolutely.
And then we'll come back. We've got just a couple of last questions, and we'll get down to it.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay, Derek, we're back.
Yeah.
Let's finish this off and see what we can do.
So, Matt, I had a question for you, and I wanted to ask it. And if you remember earlier in this conversation, I asked, was there any example that you can think of where you overcompensated for something you felt your father was deficient in? And again, that was connected to the fact that I had a fear that because my father wasn't around, I would overcompensate by smothering my child. So do you have something like that?
I do. It's something that we talked about last time that we got together, but there was a time where I grew up in my father's house where I was terrified of my dad. Like, actually,
you told me that.
Scared.
Yeah, you told me
I
that.
would hear his keys clinking together outside the door where I was inside watching over my sister for every day after school until 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And my dad would come home. And I would be scared that he would come in. He would see that I hadn't vacuumed that day, or I hadn't done the dishes, or whatever the case may be. And he would get really angry.
Yeah.
And I knew that he loved me, but it was such an over-the-top sort of anger of like, I hadn't done the things that were expected of me.
Yeah.
And so I got in trouble for that. And without trying to give myself credit, in looking at what fatherhood is now, I was a great kid. I wasn't involved in drugs. I wasn't involved in crime. I got along with my sister fairly well. He didn't have a whole lot that he had to worry about with me. And it ended up turning out a little later on that he recognized that about himself maybe a little too late, because it drove me out of the house to go live with my mom, because I was happier there. And I wasn't getting yelled at by my dad, who had all of these really high expectations of me. And I wasn't strong enough to be able to tell him, like, you're just asking too much.
Yeah.
I couldn't say no. I couldn't say no to my dad.
Yeah, of course. No, I get that.
So I was really scared for a really long time. And so there was a time where as I became a dad, I was following that same example, and I would get upset about the tiniest things that really didn't have any real
value in
right. It was just a simple thing, and I would get upset about it. And I recognized that. And so I tried to compensate for that by backing off and being a little lighter. And this may still be the case today, where maybe I don't get upset as much as I should about different things, about grades or about whatever.
Yeah.
It doesn't get to me like that because I don't want to have the relationship with my children that I had with my dad.
Makes sense.
And so I overcompensate towards letting more things slide than getting upset about it, because I don't want that coloring my relationship.
Yeah.
I still get upset from time to time, but I try to talk my way through it. And my oldest children, 22, 17, and 15, they're largely past the point where I need to get upset about it.
Yeah.
They are very responsible children and a real benefit in a lot of ways to society.
Yeah.
And so I don't have to do a whole lot of parenting with them. And the 4-year-old, as much of an independent streak as she has, I can tell her no, but it doesn't make a whole lot of difference because she's going to do what she wants to do anyway.
Yeah.
And so I find experience ends up making the biggest difference there of like, okay, well, if that's what you want to do, I'll just watch over you to make sure that you don't get too hurt.
Yeah, exactly.
and we'll just see how it works out. So that would be where I probably make an overcompensation towards my dad's faults or failures in a sense.
That makes sense. Very good. No, I thank you for sharing that because I don't, every time we talk, I get a little bit more knowledgeable about fatherhood. So I honestly do not know. I come from a place where I'm just open to learn it. So cool. Very cool.
So I'm curious to know, since we're winding down, I've only got a couple of questions left.
Okay.
What would you like to tell the fathers listening out there? What sort of advice would you have for them that you would like to share with them?
Yeah, no, that's
what
really
do you want
good.
them to know?
No, that's a great question. If I had to give one piece of advice to the fathers out there, I think it would be, or I guess just something that I've experienced that I want to share. I would say that I could easily imagine the day in and day out grind of being a father being very difficult, emotionally challenging, physically challenging, spiritually challenging, economically challenging. Every aspect of your life is affected when you have a child. I don't have any children, but I know that much. What I would say is that no matter how much you feel like it wasn't worth it, it is worth it to somebody, and that is your child. And I would also say this is that so all the effort that you put in, even if you don't feel like it's accomplishing what you wanted to, it is accomplishing something. And it means something to someone else. But even more importantly, let's say your child doesn't turn out the way you wanted them to. Do the best you can, not just for you, not just for your family, but for society. As a father, as a man, your responsibility is not just to your tribe, but it's also to do the absolute best you can so that you can look back later on in life and say, you know what? Yeah, my child maybe didn't turn out the best possible, but I did my best, and I know I did. And I've got to hang my hat on that. Mm-hmm. So don't quit just because it's hard. And I know I can say that with no kids, and that's easy for me to say, but I had a father who did quit because it was hard. Don't do that to your child. Just don't. Or you'll end up with a kid like me. And I've got issues, believe me. I've got subscriptions. I've got so many issues. So that would be the piece of advice I share with dads out there.
Well, I would say that if they end up with a kid like you, they should count their blessings.
Oh, well, then thank you. I'd
That-
be your son. You can adopt me right now, Matt. If you pay my student debt off, that'd be great, Dad.
You want to mow my lawn a few times?
Exactly. Hey, you know what? Whatever. I'll fix that banister. I'll put the coat on where Anna did the carving.
Don't you touch that. We're going to have words later. All right. So that covers that pretty well. And I would say that is amazing advice. You're absolutely right. That is something that I feel marrow deep. It's just that that effort it's not there every day. That payoff isn't there. But there are certain times in your life when you're spending time with that child and something just absolutely amazing happens in that tiny little moment. And it could be just something as simple as them writing their name for the first time, where you're like, wow, that was the payoff. And the feeling is amazing. And it comes in just those little moments when you least expect it.
Yeah, and I'm doing a lot of projection, a lot of imagining, but
You're doing a great job.
But helping a young human become more of a person.
Yeah.
Come on, you know?
Yeah.
That's got to be amazing. And so I think dads should never trivialize their efforts and what they're doing, because they are contributing to the creation of a person, not just a human being. Because, you know, any two people can knock boots. Any two people can have sex and create a person. I mean, not anybody, but a lot of people are fertile enough to have children. But to create a person, a sustainable being that moves society forward and civilization, you know, in a good path, takes civilization in a good path, that's amazing. Right. That's the real deal, dude. So.
Okay, so we're at the last question.
Oh boy, here we go.
You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. What's your last question?
Right, last question. This is a repeat. You didn't give me an answer last time.
Oh, here we go.
What's your favorite dad joke?
So you know what's is coming, because I actually, after our last conversation, I was at work, and it's an undisclosed company website.
Thank you for that.
Exactly. And they had 3 really bad dad jokes. I mean, they were the worst kind of dad jokes. So I'm going to take the first one. And that dad joke is, what do you call a bunch of flying rabbits?
What do you call a bunch of flying rabbits?
A hair force.
Fair.
There you go. That is about as dad jokey as I can get.
That's good
Hair
stuff.
force. Wow. Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Pretty punny.
Yeah. Well, Derek, it's been an amazing episode again.
Thanks.
You provided a wealth of information for those who bothered to stick with us this entire time.
This is a lot.
It is. I think we covered just about everything that we could.
Good.
I am so thankful to have you on the episode.
Yeah, well, if you ever want me back, I will. You're a good host and a good guy. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks for your time.
Yeah,
Derek.
absolutely.
Everybody, thanks for watching. I appreciate your time as well. Certainly give us any sort of feedback that you have in the comments, and we look forward to seeing you next episode. Take care. Cheers.
Cheers, yes.
Seriously, and I mean seriously, I've had to lose some serious hairs to sleep because of this perilous pair of trees in the street. Oh, we've